This is the 2023 BMW X1. It's the new third generation model and it recently got completely overhauled, so everything is new. It's also BMW's most affordable model, so as an entry-level SUV, it has a huge responsibility because it has to be so many things to so many different people. So, does it succeed? Well, I can't tell you that right now because then you're not going to watch this car review video.
For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that.
So first of all, I think BMW actually nailed it with this redesign. This X1 looks so good. The proportions are right. It looks really sporty. The lines make sense. Love these headlights too. Also really love this grille because it gives you that strong BMW personality without being too in your face or too controversial, which is great. I also really love this paint color. It's an optional color and it's not quite green and it's not quite gray, but it has this very subtle pearlescent shine to it when the light hits it just right. And people have been complimenting me on it all week, so I'm a really big fan. One thing that was surprising to me about the X1 is how practical it is. So I always assumed the X1 was a tiny SUV, but there's actually a ton of space back here. So in the trunk, there's room for about 730 liters of stuff. And with the seats folded flat, that opens up to about 1,600 liters. And I really love how the seats fold because they fold in a 40-20-40 pattern. And what that means is you can put the middle part down independently. So you can put a bunch of skis in there and still have room for 4 adults, which is amazing. So BMW did a really great job updating this X1's cabin because it feels every bit like a BMW should, which is really impressive even at this entry-level price point. So there's lots of really luxurious materials here, really nice leathers and woods and aluminum trim. This speaker grate is so sharp that it could probably grate cheese, and I'm lactose intolerant, but I still really love cheese. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that there are some hard black plastics in here that I can already see are really prone to scratches, which is perhaps the only kind of cost-cutting measure I can see in here, but the rest of it is pretty great. The other thing that's new is that this is now running BMW's newest infotainment system, and so that means that now the gauge cluster and the infotainment screen are both housed under a single panel of curved glass, and it looks really high-end and very luxurious. The menus themselves have been simplified, so it's easier to find what you're looking for without digging around too much. I do wish there were more shortcuts for climate control because right now you have to go into the touchscreen and do it. And that includes stuff like your heated steering wheel and your heated seats. So I really prefer to have buttons for those. And it is interesting to note that this BMW doesn't have that little rotary dial that most BMWs do. And I like having both options because I find the rotary dial easier to use while you're driving and the touchscreen easier to use when you're parked because it's less distracting in either case. And this one doesn't have that, so it's one thing to note. The other really interesting thing I love about the X1 is how practical it is inside, which was again a huge surprise for me. So there's this huge shelf of storage space under the center console. The side door pockets are big enough to hold my big water bottle, which is really nice to see. And they made a really smart use of all the space, and I think it's very clever how they did it. One cool thing I wanted to note is the wireless phone charger. So I've never actually seen a wireless phone charger like this. And at first I thought it was kind of weird because it's completely upright. And then it uses this little arm to kind of sandwich your phone in place. But the more I used it, the more I actually thought it was very brilliant. Because it's upright, it means that it's less likely you're going to forget your phone when it's hidden away. And it's also really nice to see because you can quickly glance down and check a notification without it being too distracting. So I really love that. Wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay are included as standard, which is fantastic. I've had really great experiences using it so far. It's really nice because it's integrated very smoothly. So if you're using Google Maps navigation, it will show you the navigation instructions in the gauge cluster and in the head-up display, which I love to see. But one weird thing it does is that it continues to play my podcasts even when I've exited the car and I'm like unloading the trunk, which is kind of annoying because then I have to rewind it later to catch up what I missed. But speaking of podcasts, I've been listening to a really good one. It's called Own the Road with AutoTrader, and they make car stuff simple for Canadians, so you should probably check it out. All right, so this BMW X1 is powered by a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It has 241 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. All-wheel drive is of course standard, and it also has a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic transmission. Now a dual-clutch automatic transmission simply means that it shifts faster and more smoothly than a regular transmission. So all in, that's able to get this X1 from 0 to 100 kilometers in about 6.4 seconds. Unofficially, it's ample passing power. You'll really not feel like you need any more power in any situation. Passing people, getting up to highway speeds happens so quickly. Power builds really nice and smoothly. And what I like about this BMW is that all of those elements just work together really, really cohesively to give you a very BMW-like driving experience. One complaint I have is the steering. I find it a little bit twitchy on the highway, but it's not a deal breaker. And some people might actually find the suspension a little bit stiff over rough roads and railroads and stuff like that. But I think the payoff in handling is very, very worth it, because this X1, even though it is a small SUV, to me it feels a lot like a hot hatch. So it feels really confident in the corners, it stays nice and flat, and it feels very nimble. So I like the adaptability it has. You know, it feels good during your daily commute, but you know, if you also want to have fun and hustle it through some corners, it can do that too. So there's a couple things about the driving experience that I did want to point out. Number one is that I'm not a huge fan of how thick these A-pillars are, and there's no little triangular window here, so it creates kind of a big blind spot. For me in the city, it just makes it a little bit harder to see people, you know, pedestrians and stuff like that, so you just have to pay extra attention, which is fine. One big benefit is that it does have pedestrian detection and cyclist detection. So if you're in the city, it will warn you if you're going to open your door and there's someone coming, so you don't want to door them. So that's a really nice safety feature that I think it comes standard, which is really nice. One other thing I don't really like about the driving is the stop-start system. So in general, I just think it's really rough and very disruptive. And there's also no hard button to turn it off, so you're forced to go into the touchscreen to turn it off. Making matters worse is that it doesn't remember your selection, so every time you get into the car, you're forced to do it again, which is kind of annoying, and I don't like it. One thing I love that BMW did is this time around they finally included a lot of those really great safety features as standard, and they used to charge for all that stuff, which I never loved. I always think these safety features should come standard because you shouldn't have to pay more to be more safe. So now it comes with all the really good stuff like lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring, all that good stuff. Adaptive cruise control is an additional option, but it is there if you want it. And in general, I don't feel like there's any safety features missing from this X1, which is really good to see. There are some other really interesting packages as well. So one that I recommend getting is basically a fancy parking assistant system that helps you navigate through trickier parking spaces and garages and stuff like that. So that's really handy. Another thing it does is that it has a selfie camera, which is kind of a gimmick, so you can take pictures of you and your friends when you're on a road trip. But I find it more useful because through an app you can use it to check if you've left anything in the back seats or anything, or if it detects that your car is stolen, it'll start recording the driver inside so you can nab them and call the cops. The other thing it includes is kind of like a dash cam, which will start recording if it detects that there's a crash or if there's any suspicious activity going around your car, and I love that feature. So now we can finally talk about pricing, which I know you're all dying to hear about because this is BMW's most affordable model. So pricing starts at around 48 grand, including destination, which I actually think is a really great value considering all the stuff you get, and when you consider the fact that something like a Honda CR-V hybrid costs more, and to be honest, I'd much rather have this X1. But then with all of the options and everything added in, this model I'm testing ends up being over $58,000, and that's before taxes. And at that point, it starts to feel a little bit expensive considering the size and all the other stuff you can get for that price. But then if you consider that a similar Volvo XC40 or an Audi Q3 can end up costing as much, I think it's all fine in the end. You know, we just have to understand that cars are expensive these days, and when we kind of have to recalibrate the way we think about car pricing, it all starts to make sense. To recap, I love the BMW X1's stylish looks, generous standard safety features, and great BMW driving experience. I don't love the rough stop-start system, the scratchy plastics, or the expensive options. So to answer that cliffhanger from the top of this video, yes, I absolutely think the BMW X1 is a great entryway into the brand because it does everything a BMW is supposed to do. It drives really well, it's stylish, it feels luxurious inside, and as a bonus, it's very user-friendly and very practical and easy to live with day to day. So it gives you that full BMW experience. It's a great all-rounder, all for a price that isn't too obscene.